Do you still believe this today when you see unarmed black teenagers being killed by the police? When you see protests in St. Louis, in Missouri, where you lived for a long time? When you see people taking to the streets in Atlanta and New York to denounce police brutality against young African American men? Do you think the system really is for these people?
Well, the system was never for them.
So what made you say this?
Because when I said that, I was...
There's Acorn Lighting Africa. You've also joined the non-profit organization Peace One Day with a huge concert in Goma in the east of the DRC earlier this year. Tell us about that experience. What's the objective?
Well, with Peace One Day, it's really a huge event that just promotes peace. It's that one day in the year where you just ask yourself, who do I want to make peace with? You know, we oftentimes are conflicted and no one's communicating. Like, you could be mad at me for a whole year and a half and we haven't even spoke. And sometimes, a lot of times, it's just all miscommunication. So Peace One Day is that moment that we try to create annually that can create that moment for people to communicate.
Well, you know, the reason I asked about what you thought about all these Western musicians and so on, because there's a paternalistic view that still exists today, and this is like decades after colonialism and so on, that Africa still must be saved by the West.
Well, actually, honestly, believe it or not, that's actually true. But I don't think the word save is the right word for Africa. Because Africa, to an extent, has been the anchor to the rest of the world. Every natural resource that's keeping every country in the world operating is resources that's been pulled from Africa. Everyone benefits but Africa. So Africa doesn't need to be saved. Africa's the one doing the saving.
Akon, you've said, if I could have my way, Africa would be the United States of Africa with just one leader. Of course, Marcus Garvey wrote a poem about this. Bob Marley sung about this. Muammar Gaddafi, the Libyan leader, poured his wealth into this idea of a United States of Africa. But really, is it, when you look at Africa today, a continent of over 1 billion people, over 2,000 different languages, is it realistic?
Well, first of all, I think it has to be our generation and the generation that come after us to achieve it. I don't think this generation would ever be able to achieve it because there's too much history and it's too much built up into where it started today. It has to be set from a generation that's clear from the history, clear from conflict, and see the world in the way that we see it. The only way Africa can evolve in that way is that we have to be united. There has to be a united Africa. It has to be one Africa. It can't be so many countries with so many leaders, so many opinions. You know, all those countries, I think, should be broken down into basically states. And there should be one president, and he or she should be democratically elected by all Africans to do what's best for Africa.
But I mean, in just one country already, it's so difficult to have a democratic election. How do you have a democratic election in a so-called United States of Africa? How do you do that?
It's not hard. I mean, listen, if China can do it, and they don't even have a democratic election.
So maybe what? So you know maybe what democracy is something that Africa doesn't need.
Africa,
maybe
there
it has to be another form of rule.
There has to be elections. If you want to keep Africa stable, there has to be elections. All we need is Africans to be able to govern themselves. What's stopping Africa from governing themselves now and creating that one Africa is that there's still foreigners in certain areas that still control Africa. You know, prime example,
the former colonial powers.
Francophone countries. If the French just get out the way, we can really be okay. But a lot of the wars is set up from influences.
Are you interested in getting into politics one day?
Absolutely not. Hell no.
Why is that? I mean, you have all these great ideas, but
Listen,
you're not interested.
I would prefer to be the guy standing next to the president. I would never want to be a president.
Akon, you're considered a first-generation American. Your parents are African. You were born in the United States, but spent your early childhood in Senegal and then moved back to the United States. What do you consider yourself today? Are you American? Are you African? Are you African American? What are you?
I'm an African raised in America. You know, clearly.
So you're not American?
I wish I was, but my mind is not African. I mean American. It's clearly African.
But you have the accent. You have,
I went to school in America. All my whole earlier childhood, I was raised in Africa. Then I came to America. Every summer, we would go back to Africa for a vacation. And then when I graduated high school, it was a choice whether we wanted to go to Africa or stay in the U.S. And just the opportunities in the U.S. were so much greater than Africa.
Well, you're certainly the perfect example of the American dream coming true.
Thank you.
Millions of Africans who make it to the States and who don't, have the same success and the same luck as you have. And, what would be your advice to a young African who's immigrating to the United States today?
Well, I think this advice will go to any person migrating into the States. Ultimately, you can't change who you are. And I think the biggest obstacle is that when people come to the U.S., they kind of alienate their original personalities, way of lives, and they conform to what's there. And when you do that, first of all, you will never get accepted.
But isn't that the best way to integrate?
Absolutely not, because first of all, you can't, it's no way you can move forward and you're not you. Like, one thing I do notice about America is that they respect other cultures. They actually admire other cultures very much. So when they can see the difference in who you are, their attitude towards you is completely different as well too. But if you're walking into me and I know you're a foreigner, but you're acting like an American, you just seem fake. It's not genuine. So the respect level is completely different. But if I walk up to you as an American and you're clearly an African or Asian, that makes me more curious about who you are. I ask more questions. I'm now I'm more intuitive about what this is. I get more motivated to want to learn more about it. And then the respect level is different because now you're teaching me something. You follow?
So when you're in the States, you're proud to say you're African?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, clearly African.
Right. You once told the Source magazine, and I want to quote this, "Black people in the U.S. can nag all they want how the system is against black people, but if they saw how other people lived in Africa, they would see how blessed they really are." Do you still believe this today when you see unarmed black teenagers being killed by the police, when you see protests in St. Louis, in Missouri, where you lived for a long time, when you see people taking to the streets in Atlanta and New York to denounce police brutality against young African American men? Do you think the system really is for these people?
Well, the system was never for them.
So what made you say this?
Because when I said that, I was talking about the environment and where they live and the rights that they actually have and the blessing that they do, have actual access to. In Africa, the way I grew up, let's just pick a project in New York, for instance. That's a 5-star hotel compared to the environment I came up in. Like, if they see how they live, they actually get money from the government. They actually are programs that helps the impoverished and the poor, and you get food stamps, and they have it good compared to Africa. You follow? There's a huge difference in how the government allocate funds towards poor and how the government allocates funds towards poor in Africa. The environments are not even left and right. If these guys were able to be taken from where the environment they're in now to the same equal environment in Africa, they would be crying to come back home to America. Literally.
But you say now that the system is against them.
Let's get to the system.
Yes, through the
I was
system.
talking about way of life.
Right.
Now, as far as the system in America was never built for black people. And this is my personal opinion. I'm speaking for myself. I don't believe it was never built for black people because that system has never been changed. Those documents has never been altered. These things were made back in the 1800s, and these are the same exact literature that's down today. So mind you, at the time it was made, black people was never in a position where they were, looked at as equal. So if it's the same documents that they're applying today in 2014, it wasn't meant for them.
What was it like growing up as a black man in America?
Well, in America it was a little different because I was a foreigner. I was African and I was very dark skinned. And at the time, dark skin wasn't really in style, so I was always getting picked on in school. So my
But you were in trouble a lot.
That's what got me in trouble. It was frustration.
What got you in trouble?
Just the way I felt. I felt I was being mistreated and unfairly judged because I was African. So I was always in fights. And
you spent time in jail?
I've spent some time in jail. Collectively about 3 years, but my longest bid was about 6 months.
What for?
Stealing cars and hustling. Yeah.
So again, what was it like then? I mean, when you see, Ferguson, Missouri today, and you hear of Michael Brown and Eric Garner and so on. Do you sympathize? Do you see? Do you understand that experience that these people are denouncing today?
I clearly understand the frustration. What I don't understand is that how, like, if I'm in a position of where they are, and I don't want to speak too much from them because I think I may have some knowledge that they may not quite have, right? Because I've been in a position where I've experienced Africa and I've experienced the United States. I always felt like Africa was for Africans. So when I see African Americans in America dealing with all these issues, my first question is, why don't they just go back home?
Where?
Back to Africa. Will they be treated fair? Will they actually be praised for who they are because of the fact that they're American? They'll get way better treatment. They can invest their money back home. But come on,
Akon, how do you tell people who've lived for generations, centuries and centuries in one land to move back to a place they don't know? I mean,
no, but that's my point. They don't know. It starts with a visit. How many African Americans do you know actually consider Africa as a vacation spot? Not one. There's when you look at the overall population of African Americans, a very few percentage would decide to go to Africa for vacation. Would even, just for knowledge, just to know where they come from, just to get an idea of what that is. It's so much fear installed into them that they wouldn't even want to even go there to visit. You mentioned Africa, they start shaking.
I want to talk about women.